Hi, PJ.
Hi.
So
Thanks for
welcome to
having
our
me.
show. So can you talk, tell us a little bit about your film?
Sure. So my film is called Call Her Gunda, and it's about the events that surround Jennifer Laude, who is a 26-year-old trans woman who was discovered dead in a motel room in Olongapo City in the Philippines, with the prime suspect being a U.S. Marine. And this story caught a lot of attention when local authorities discovered they couldn't detain the Marine due to visiting forces agreements between the two countries. So it's also a look at kind of the problematic colonial relationship between the United States and the Philippines.
Yeah. So I heard, because I followed the event too that time, but like I followed it, but I didn't, go film it or actually immerse myself into the case. So I heard you followed the journalist called Meredith, right?
I follow a journalist called Meredith Thomas.
Yeah. You actually went to Philippines with her, right? And then what made you to decide, just follow the story and immerse yourself into the case and actually made it a documentary? You just want to record a case or you want to know more about it? What's the motivation or intention?
Sure. I think with all my documentaries, I look at them as an opportunity to explore a topic, but also to just learn, and grow as an individual. So for me, I'm Filipino American. I was born and raised in the United States. My parents hail from the Philippines. I also identify as queer. So I think this story in particular, struck a lot of interest in me just because it covers so much of who I am in terms of my own personal identity. And at some point I realized, being born and raised here in the United States, I know very little about the Philippines. And in fact, I learned very little about the Philippines growing up. There was a lot of information that was omitted from the textbooks. But the United States has been in the Philippines for over 100 years. And so for me, I saw this also as an opportunity to just become aware of what's happening there and learn more about my culture.
Yeah, and I feel like because I saw you have made a lot of documentaries before, and it's actually, yes, it's a really good way to learn and just be aware of what's going on in the world. And so you made Before You Know It, and that time you was the director, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and then Trouble the Water as cinematographer.
Correct.
So do you prefer like filming documentaries more than, because you also did a couple of dramas, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like, do you prefer doing documentaries? And then what do you think documentaries like fascinate you?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm interested in all forms of film and media, and I think it's really up to the story, what's the best form to tell it. And in this case, it's a true story, right? So I think it taking the form of a nonfiction feature makes sense. I'm still interested in making other types of stories and in different types of forms. But I think there's something about documentary in particular, especially right now. I think there's a lot of attention to nonfiction films because some of these things, honestly, you can't make up. And the power of it is knowing that these things really happen in real life. So the fact that a U.S. Marine can take the life of a local Filipino trans woman, it says something about our current day and where we are. So I think the power is knowing that these are real events and that they're really unfolding and they're still ongoing, and maybe as an audience member, not only are you becoming aware of them, maybe it'll inspire some kind of political action or some kind of, change in terms of how you want to view the rest of the world.
Also, so during the filming, like you were actually in Philippines, and then did that experience kind of change your perspective? You are American Filipino, but change your perspective on Filipino culture?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this film changed a lot of my perspective of the Philippines. I'd only been there a couple times, mostly as a kid. I'd been there once or twice as an adult, but this was my opportunity to kind of forge my own relationships with it. And you know, I met a lot of the local film community. I became more aware of the local queer communities, and that was really great. But I also recognized how much of the Philippines I didn't realize was there. It's such a rich culture, and there's such a long history of LGBT individuals. You know, pre-colonial time, there's a large history of individuals that maybe modern day we would label as trans. You know, these are all things I had no idea about. And frankly, a lot of this culture was wiped out due to waves of colonization, right? You have Spain that was in the Philippines for 400 years, and during that time period, a lot of the native indigenous cultures, you know, were targeted at that point. So a lot of this was just also me learning about the history of the Philippines.
So this film obviously unfolding a lot of like topics, not only like homophobia, and also about the colonial, and also about the relationship between America and Philippines, and also justice. A lot of topics. So what do you want the audience to take away? What kind of message do you want when the audience, after they watch the film, what message do you want them to take away from your film?
Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, I hope people see this film and recognize a mother lost her child, right? And I think whether or not you're Filipino, whether or not you're trans, I think the idea of losing a loved one is something that probably everyone can identify with. But also knowing that there was some injustice that took place that allowed for this to happen. You know, it's only through the combined efforts of various communities coming together, demanding change, and demanding action to be taken, that something actually did happen. So I also hope that when people watch this film, they realize we're living in a time period right now where being aware is not enough. If you see an injustice and you feel strongly about it, you have to say something. And maybe if you say something, other people will join you, and maybe together, people banding together can actually create some kind of change. So I hope people also walk away from it feeling inspired that their voice is important, right? And they also have a responsibility to their communities to stand up for one another.
Yeah, that's why I always feel like documentary filmmaker sometimes are like an activist.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's also very fortunate, like lucky that we know how to use camera to record things. But also documentary filmmaker, like different from drama or thriller. You don't have to prepare too much. You just take your camera and go. And then, so sometimes a lot of things, like very improv things, will just, pop out. So that's why I'm really, really excited to see your film, tonight at 7 p.m., right?
Yeah. For me, and it's interesting because people have asked me, like, do you consider yourself an activist? And for me, I hold that term very seriously. Like, to me, activists are the ones like on the forefront, like scream, demanding, like making those signs, like showing up early. But I look at it as I'm more of like an advocate. Like, I'm going to use my skills as a filmmaker to do what I can do. But also at the end of the day, I'm trying to tell a story that connects to all of us just on a human level. It makes you feel something, and makes you think something, and makes you, desire something. And I think that's important to do, because that's a way to also inspire change in people, right? Is to put them in someone else's shoes.
Definitely does. So what's your next project?
Yeah, so this right now is, I literally just finished this film like maybe 2 weeks ago.
Like all the post-production, everything.
Yeah, the post-production,
Oh my God.
it just world premiered at Tribeca last week practically. So it's still very fresh. However, having spent more time in the Philippines now, I definitely am interested in making more work there. So I'm developing something right now, which I think is going to take the form of more of a fiction narrative piece. So we'll see. Yeah, but I definitely have things in the works.
Oh, and just by the way, the last question, how long? I'm always very curious, like, because documentary can take really long, like from 1 year to 12, 5, 15 years. So how long does it take for you to, because that was an accident, an event, so it wasn't, the filming duration wasn't that long, right? How long was it?
Probably from the moment I learned about the case until finishing it, it was about 3.5, close to 4 years. Yeah, because the crime took place in October 2014.
Yeah.
You know, so it's about 3 years. Yeah, 3.5 years. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
Can't wait to see it. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks so
Peter.
much.